nice, easy question to start with. Ed, how many helicopters are in long-term storage?
A lot.
Great. Precise. Joe, any thoughts?
I don't have a statistic on it. I can say that over the course of the past decade, so even preceding what we might have perceived as the sort of, catalyzed downturn related to energy prices crashing, storage has been a part of our business. It has certainly grown. I would say at any given point in time, between two MRO facilities, we probably have 15 to 20 aircraft in storage that we're hangering and maintaining airworthiness on 28-day ground runs. And I would say that of that population, there's probably been a bedrock 8 to 10 that have come and never left. And there's been, with respect to the other, call it 2/3, they've kind of cycled through.
And why, if you've got an aircraft that's been in, should we call it short-term storage, 28-day run, why would you just keep doing that for years?
I think it's because you hope the day is going to get better and it goes back to work. I mean, that's the we just signed a contract on Monday and we're taking 2 aircraft to part out. They've been in storage since 2015.
Steve, you go to a lot of hangars. Do you have a qualitative guide to how many aircraft are in storage?
Well, the last 2 years, we have done around 225 helicopters worldwide, and some of those were replacement kits. They take them out of storage and put them back in storage.
Okay, Joe, going back to your short-term storage, what point do you make the decision about storage versus scrapping?
So we're effectively an agent, and the principal makes that decision. I would say that for the most part, Ed's exactly right. The hope is that there will be a customer who either wants to acquire, or to the extent that it's owned by a lessor, that wants to lease. And we've certainly seen some uptake with respect to that. There are a couple of particular aircraft right now, funny you mention it, on a call yesterday, where my president and COO is encouraging the customer, partly because we just need the room in the hangar, to get them gone one way or the other, and we would be happy to part them out. That has not been a big part of our business, really. But there may be, in this particular case, a somewhat opportune way of working with the OEM, because it's an out-of-production model, and they might actually be able to benefit from some excess inventory.
And I think for some owners, whether they're financial owners or operators, once you go down the part out path, you're not coming back. There may be an accounting issue. Somebody doesn't want to have to take the loss. You may realize $1 million from a part out, but if it's on your books for $4 million, you're better off or you may feel better off kicking the can down the road, even though the economics would say you should do the part out. I think what you're certainly seeing now, like people realizing, some of these aircraft aren't really going to fly again, or they've been in storage and maybe not in one of Steve's protective cocoons, maybe not run up every 28 days.
Don't say not.
No, but I mean, like, there's just stuff that's sitting around that people have not really stored properly. It's more just kind of sitting over there, and we're going to get to it eventually. And then at that point, whether it's the cost of making it airworthy again, doing bulletins that might have built up, at that point, it's like part out's maybe your only real option.
I tell you, of the vast majority of the calls that we get is it's going into storage, but we don't have any idea when it's going to come out. That's the vast majority of what we get in the marketplace, and we've had some that have been in storage for 2.5 years. and still sitting there without a decision being made.
No, I mean, obviously, Steve, your business is about long-term storage. I think Ed's point is a very good one. I think often there's a reluctance to sort of take the medicine that's associated with recognizing, reflecting on the books, the true value of the asset. The point that I was going to emphasize is the other point Ed made, which is neglect is your worst option because it really does, at the point in time that you may be able to bring it back into service, if you haven't had a program of regular ground runs, maintenance, and at least attending to what is coming due or service bulletins that will need to be addressed to get it back into service, it becomes this giant, sort of incomprehensible thing that in and of itself requires a fair amount of cost just to research. And then once you've kind of racked up the numbers, that friction, if you will, in the transaction tends to queer the deal. Which is when,
So in some ways, the neglected aircraft is the better part-out candidate.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
But
May
actually,
not realize as much money, but I mean, at that point, it's like that's all you can really do with it.
But also, you will probably have lost meaningful value and remaining time on, major
Absolutely,
components
yeah.
like transmissions, because the only way to then really make that marketable is to get it overhauled and so forth.
Okay, but Ed, how many helicopters have you been involved in now?
So I say I don't really do any of the part out and
You're not screwing.
No. And my partner that I've been working with has been doing it for a couple of years, but 1476s. The two additional ones from Monday will be 16. I think the cheapest one he bought was $5,000. That was one of the early ones, an A model. And the most expensive one we bought was the one that I bought with him, which was like $350 for a C+. $350,000 for a C+. Now, we've done some of these on consignment. We're looking at other aircraft besides the 76, but that's just kind of what he's been doing, and so that's kind of been the area of focus, and there's a lot of 76s out there.
How many can you part out, though? It's a finite market, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you had 10, you could part 10 out eventually, but you can't, you could part them out, but you can't sell the parts. 10 76s, 40 blades, like, the market's just not going to absorb that many. So the limitation, I think, on part out is building the demand with operators. So one way to do this is to lease some of the aircraft out. The other way to do is to offer an alternative PBH, as Corey was talking about today. These are things that people are actively thinking about, working on, but the other bit is, well, okay, let's part out a 109, part out a Super Puma. I mean, these are things that are happening, but it tends to be by an operator that's got an extra aircraft and is doing it for its own purpose, as opposed to, the business that exists around part out in the fixed wing world. That's just not really here in helicopters today.
And how quickly can you get a return on it? Or is it just luck?
I don't think it's luck. I mean, if you buy it right, you can get your return pretty quickly. I mean, if you sell the engine, you may get your return. It's partly, I mean, one of the reasons we've done consignments is, because there's so many of these aircraft out there, the price at which, you're willing to buy is so low. I mean, it's a huge win for us if we can buy one at that cheap of a price, but the far better option would be to just, work with the owner to break the thing down, sell off the pieces, and realize the value over 6 to 12 months. I mean, that's generally what we're looking at. If we've sold the big stuff, the rest of it can just go in the dumpster. I mean, which sounds very wasteful. If you're an operator, you could, use the whole carcass of the aircraft. But the way we're looking at it, it's sell the big stuff that's easy to move, get rid of the rest of it.
Which is basically going to be the engine and the blades, assuming.
Yeah, but some of the avionics and some of the, but
the really big stuff is typically
correct.
The bulk of the value.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do we have any questions in the audience? or comments? Okay, Steve, are you seeing are you seeing the market picking up, which is bad for you? Are you seeing less interest in long-term storage?
Yeah.
To take a role?
We've seen the market, the definition of a good market and a bad market. When we came on board and came up with the concept, the oil price was diving. The rigs were shutting down, offshore rigs were shutting down, and then the 225 hit about the same time. And so we were pushing it hard. We have an on-site team that was just going around the globe packaging the helicopters that weren't flying. The oil has improved. There's not been another catastrophe, and the number of bags that we were putting on long-term preservation kits, they're still using them, but on a much shorter basis.
Joe, are you feeling more optimistic?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of like so many things in the helicopter industry, you really have to look at it by type. I think that there are probably some types that are, the only way you're going to get spares is basically through a part out. I mean, one model that comes to mind would be like the BO-105. It's effectively not truly in operation in most of the developed world. And the last time we sold one, which was, I don't even know how many years ago, closer to a decade, it went to Venezuela, and it went as a flyer. But I know that, friends at Airbus, would just as soon see the entire remaining flying fleet end up in the ocean someday. So people would, that would, in theory, create demand for 135s. I think there are other more problematic questions around particularly the heavier iron, which I, frankly, that doesn't intersect with our business as much. But I suspect that there will be, or there will need to be, sort of creative solutions, and ultimately those solutions, ideally, to really work, require some degree of OEM sponsorship to be able to, both deal with an overhang of aftermarket supply, probably some sort of synthetic solution around PBH, and then as that kind of backlog, if you will, clears through, and particularly, for example, on the S92, what we heard today about significant, kind of step function reduction in costs as they move to the A plus and B model, maybe that's what ends up sort of pulling through. But there's clearly some degree of excess supply in the aftermarket across many types that needs to be dealt with.
Corey talked about innovative power-by-the-hour programs not being run for older aircraft, probably not being run by the OEM. It
didn't exist at the time.
Do you think it could exist?
I think it exists now. I mean, maybe not for all types, but there are companies that provide. One of your sponsors.
That was JSSI,
yeah. But I mean, look, their Heli One, provides PBH. Eagle does it on its leased fleet. So, but that said, it's. I don't want to speak for Corey, but I think he was probably thinking there's a wider mix of possible programs than just that, and I think he's right. Like finding ways that are going to bring operator costs down as well as consume some of this supply overhang, like that makes sense. And to pick up on Joe's point, like for something like the 92, maybe the overhang there isn't as bad as it is in some other aircraft types, but it's really hard to part those aircraft out because, who do you sell the parts to if they're in PBH? It's a limiter.
Okay, any more questions? If not, anything anyone wants to add on storage or scrapping? Ed's here to buy aircraft.
I had a question.
Question, sorry. Sharon.
Not a question, but a comment. I just want to remind everybody that this has all been done before, too. I mean, Felton Baker back in the 1980s with Houston Helicopters in the last major market downturn after an oil price crash. I mean, he just closed his doors, stored his helicopters for 3 years, and came back when stuff was better, right? Rebuilt, taking helicopters apart for a business and selling them. That's been done since the 1980s, if not before that. Graham Watt, if you're old enough to remember Graham, I mean, he's been doing that for a long, long time. So, I mean, it's all coming around again as we're kind of remembering the lessons we learned 30, 40 years ago.
Comments from those of you old enough to remember?
Well, I mean, I wasn't in the industry in the 80s when what Sharon's describing, but what you're saying...
I was in high school.
The way in which someone can sort of capitalize on the opportunity in the way that you're describing, in my opinion, completely depends on how they finance those assets. If you don't depend on the cash flow to service debt, or other types of liabilities that you've used to purchase those assets, then you have a much higher degree of freedom. If you did, then you really don't have the same set of choices.
Brilliant.
We weren't, our program is relatively new, just for the record.
And on that note, thank you very much. Thank you.